Hi everyone and welcome to my classroom. My name is Margaret Smith, otherwise known as Miss Smith or Madame Smith. I am a French language teacher here at the school and I want to make this video to help familiarize everyone with the content your students will be learning, how they're going to be learning, and why they're going to be learning. I really believe that it's essential that all students, teachers, and parents work together to make sure that their student can succeed, no matter the subject area. I think that's important all across all subjects. So I also believe that knowledge is power, and I want to make this video to grant you that power and insight into your child's classroom. Alright, so let's go over what we're covering today with regards to second language acquisition. So the 5 major influences on students' path to acquiring a second language are going to be the program of studies, the CEFR, the CLT, learning strategies and milieu, and last but not least, assessment. So what is the program of studies? Well, it's an Alberta education document. A lot of people may prefer the term curriculum, and this document is created by the Alberta government to set teaching standards and guide the teaching practice. So we're going to be going over the 9-year program of studies. That's from grade 4 to grade 12. And that is going to be the French language one. I'm going to show you right now how to find it. We're going to go into Google. We're going to Google Alberta Program of Studies. And you're just going to go down to the first link there. This website pops up, and all you have to do is scroll down until you find French as a second language. I'm using grade 10 as an example for this, so we're going to click that one. And this is really important here. You're going to want to click the 9-year program of studies. And so you would just select your preferred grade level. So there you are. That's the 9-year program of studies, grade 4 to grade 12. So the parts of the program of studies are the contents, a preface, an intro, which includes the history of language learning, our current approach to it right now, and the goals set out. Then we go to rationale, which includes student benefits and societal benefits. We have philosophy, which has all these different components here, but we'll be going over those more in depth later. And of course we have definition of outcomes, general and specific. We're going to have the general outcomes for 4 to 12, which is communication, language, culture, and language learning strategies. And then the specific outcomes here for grade 10, which is activities, shopping, fine arts, vacation, safety. And then of course a glossary, as well as the holidays that every grade will learn. So first we're going to go over the benefits of learning French here. So there's actually quite a few benefits. First of all, language learners tend to be more flexible and adaptable to new situations. Students can enhance their first language development, develop an understanding of the nature and role of language and culture in their lives. Research has shown that students studying a second language perform better in other subject areas, like I was saying before, even math and English language arts. And French can work towards the promotion of cultural understanding and respect for diversity, which is super important in our day and age. So now I'm going to work through each of the sections of the program of studies and show you how I match up the philosophy of the province with my own philosophy and the strategies I'm going to use to both teach students and assess them. So we need to break down what is language. Language is experiences and the ability to comprehend ideas and negotiate meaning, so communication. Language is linguistic elements, so elements of the French language that can be sounds, written symbols, vocabulary, word order, grammatical rules. It can be cultural knowledge, so that's the behaviors, the manifestations, cultural artifacts, symbols shared by Francophone peoples in addition to the development of intercultural skills. So language is really embedded in culture. And then cognitive strategies. You'll notice that this is in a circle, and that's because everything is connected and they feed off one another. So as you learn the linguistic elements, you're going to be learning cognitive strategies, which means you're going to be having language experience and you're going to be having communication, which is in itself embedded in culture. So you've got this cyclical nature of learning language. And of course, all skills and components are equal in importance. So the fields of experience that we're going to be going over in the 9-year program are the physical dimension, the social dimension, the civic dimension, the intellectual dimension, and the leisure dimension. So these are just all things that students are going to learn to communicate around, and these are just the different sections that the government has decided to split up the program of studies by. And then of course I want to draw attention over to the right there, and the fields of experience are organized by grade level. As such, the fields presented one grade level are reintegrated, expanded, and solidified at subsequent grade levels. So that's really important that we're going to keep continuing to go back to these different fields of experience throughout their education and building on it and making it more complex in that cyclical nature once again. And that's a really great segue into the spiral. You'll notice that this relates to the general objectives as well as the components of language learning as stated by the program of studies. So that's communication, right here. Language elements, right there, language competence or language elements. We're going to have cognitive strategies. And here where global citizenship is, just think about cultural knowledge. And as you see in the grade 7, you're going to have much narrower breadth of topics as you are in grade 10 and then again in grade 12, but you're always returning back and you're building upon and you're growing from previous knowledge. You are going to notice that there's a lot of circular imagery regarding language learning. This is because I strongly believe in contextual learning and that all aspects of language are connected and built off each other. In my class, students will not only be completing grammar worksheets to learn language. I actually think that this is a useless way to learn language because, to be honest, most students will forget isolated language facts without context. And this is where CLT comes in. I'm going to talk about it later, but for now, all you need to know is that it's communicative language teaching. So communication. This is a major category in the program of studies in the philosophy section, and so it really involves deriving meaning or significance from oral or written text, and then production is expressing meaning by creating oral and written texts, and then negotiation involves interactive process. So students are going to start by listening to different types of audio. They're going to be reading different types of texts. They're going to be watching television broadcasts. They're going to develop their comprehension skills in that way. And then the information from this is going to further develop the production. And so then they're going to start producing their own texts. They're going to start producing their own oral vocabulary. And they're going to build from that comprehension into production. And then, of course, negotiation, they're going to be able to talk with each other. They're going to talk with other French speakers. And they're going to be able to have a interactive discussion, and I think that's really key. We talk about the spiral and we see that comprehension is at the base and communication grows more complex as we move into production and then negotiation. So we're going to be narrower up here and move down into more complex and broader categories there. Moving back to CLT, with regards to communication, we have a drop of water. And so this drop of water is going to represent the droplets of vocabulary and verbs and sentence structure and how do you form a question and how do you form an answer. And so those are going to be all droplets of knowledge that these kids are going to get and put into a structure. The structure is the glass. That's what they're going to catch all of their knowledge with, and this structure is going to be maybe a communication dialogue that they can fill in and use to their advantage, and then it's going to grow more complex and they're going to be able to eventually have a discussion or engage in communication in that second language, which is what we're really aiming for. 3 subjects here in philosophy are language culture and language learning strategies. You'll notice that these are all also part of the general outcomes. So in language, we're talking about the savoir and the savoir-faire, the know and the know-how. So that's the knowledge of the vocabulary and then the application of that vocabulary. Culture, I said it before, culture and language are intertwined, they develop together, and so students are going to be exploring the different French cultures, really learning through that. And then language learning strategies. So there's 4 that I'm going to be talking about. It's cognitive, socioaffective, metacognitive, and memory strategies. Cognitive learning is just thinking skills that includes making association, identifying key words, ideas, reasoning to comprehend. And then socioaffective is learning strategies that involve a student's personal characteristics, such as how they relate to other learners, students' attitudes towards learning. And so in second language learning, this can really involve collaborating with others, tolerating unknown words. So if you're reading along and you don't know a couple of words, can you still find meaning there? And taking the risk to communicate, even if you're not 100% sure of what you want to say. And then of course metacognitive, so how students describe their own thinking and learning. Reflective learning is really what this is, and evaluating their own learning. And then memory learning is kind of what we all know and love, which is how to retain and recall vocabulary, expressions, grammatical structures, all these bases to learn a language. These 3 aspects are going to build into their own classes, and the whole point here is to continuously improve upon and grow from what is already known, and really broaden that spiral of their language learning, and make it so that they feel very competent in the language that they're speaking. The last 3 categories that the POS goes over here are technology, language competency, and assessment. I'll be talking about assessment at the end of this presentation. However, technology, we know that it's becoming more and more important. I want kids to be able to use it. Kids enjoy using technology, and so I think it's important for them to integrate it into their learning. And then language competency, which is really the overarching goal of this program, and my overarching goal is to develop students that can really speak in the language and really actually feel like they've learned the language enough to get by in a French-speaking country. So the outcomes, we've got general outcomes, and these describe the big goals of the program. So that's communication, language, culture, and strategies. We've been over that. And then specific outcomes, which are the smaller goals that include cultural, intercultural, strategic knowledge, communicative skills, linguistic skills for each grade. Here I have the grade 10 specific outcomes here, which is activities, fine arts, safety, shopping, and vacations. This is called the Common European Framework of Reference for Languages, and this is a really good guide to judge your competency in a language. Now, most university students will end up being around the C2 level. Basic, very beginner, will be at the A1 level. And so our goal is to get the students from an A1 to a B1, or possibly even a B2 competency level. And that may seem that it is low compared to these 2, like why can't we get them up here? I will explain to you the differences between A1 and a B2. So the A1 level here, what we're talking about here is can you understand and use familiar everyday expressions? Very basic, hello, how are you, how's the weather, kind of concrete language production. We are asking, can you interact in a very simple way if the other person is speaking very slowly and very clearly and is prepared to help? B2, which is upper intermediate, we're talking about, can you understand the main ideas of complex text in both concrete and abstract topics. This is including technical discussions in their field of specialization, so that could be hobbies that they enjoy. Can they talk in depth about that in the target language? And can you interact with a degree of fluency and spontaneity that makes really regular interaction easy and not very stressful? And then we're asking, can you complete detailed text? Can you write about a range of subjects, explain your viewpoint, defend yourself on various topics? So as you can see, that is actually quite in-depth and that's quite complex. And a B2 is a really good goal for language learners to complete by the time they finish high school. Now, I do like this representation here because it brings back that circle motive we were talking about earlier, and can really easily see how this relates to the spiral, the program of studies, and language learning. So you start here with these small droplets, and you get bigger and bigger and bigger. You are including more and more breadth in your subject that you can talk about, write about, listen to, you can understand. And as you become more and more proficient in the language, it encompasses everything, and it's really about growing and learning from your previous knowledge. Be-Slim is a model that I use in order to plan and give a lesson. First of all, we're going to talk about planning. This is before I enter the classroom. It includes what resources I need to know and how to adapt the lesson to fit different learning needs. In the second phase, this is called Giving It. This is what I'm going to teach, how I'm going to present it. This stage, I will present the material in the target language in a way that students will understand. So I'm going to give context, visuals, gestures, examples, anecdotes, and make it interesting and make sure that I'm giving the correct amount of information, not too much for the students to be overwhelmed and not too little for them to be bored. Getting It involves 3 to 5 activities, so you want the kids to be learning with multiple activities, approaching the content from different angles. This is going to help students understand the concept, and they can work with the material at their own rate and through a variety of learning styles. That's the real goal there with those 3 to 5 Getting It activities. And then Using It, this is where students really are going to shine, and that's where they solve problems, create, use their imaginations, and they need to transfer what they have learned into something that they are doing and apply that information that they have learned from memory and with minimal assistance. So that's where they're really working and being communicative in nature and trying to be fluent, and this is what the program of studies refers to as reworking. So they're going to rework those concepts over again and move the content from short-term to long-term memory. And then of course Proving It. This is when learning is usually demonstrated through meaningful tasks for the student, usually something that they're interested in. Maybe it's a project, maybe it's an assignment, and it's going to include many different aspects that we've been learning through the Giving It and Getting It and Using It activities. Assessment can be applied to these 3 categories, and it's what I will be doing. So they're not worrying about assessment, I'm worrying about assessment, and that's, I'm evaluating what the students are learning, I'm evaluating how they're learning, are they picking it up, if there's something I need to do differently with my teaching in order for the students to get it. And it's good for the students too, because they can evaluate their knowledge on the content and say, okay, I'm really strong in this area, but I need to work in this area. So these are all concepts that I'm going to be taking into consideration while planning and while giving the lesson and while creating activities for the students to do. So first of all is Vygotsky's zone of proximal development, and that really involves creating activities that are reachable for the students. So everything that I do is going to be within reach for the student to achieve, and it's not going to be too challenging, it's not going to be too easy. And I'm going to achieve that by scaffolding. And scaffolding is basically creating a map or a support for the students to achieve a harder or a difficult skill, and then slowly removing that scaffold. So I like to compare it to making cookies. I love to make cookies, I'm a big baker, but when I first started, I needed a recipe and I needed to be guided through. So first I had maybe a mentor or a relative help me through making cookies. We had the recipe there, we had all the materials, and then slowly I could do it on my own, and I only needed the recipe to help me be successful in making the cookies. And then finally, after many times of making the cookies, I could not only do it without a recipe, I knew the temperature that the oven needed to be at, I knew how much flour, but I could also make small changes and kind of create my own cookie recipe that I knew was going to taste good. And so that's what I mean by scaffolding, slowly removing the support so the student can take the information and flourish with it. So that really relates to planning, giving, and getting it. Again, the spiral, building complexity, and the language drops in the glass structure. Here we have the multiple intelligences: musical, bodily, kinesthetic, interpersonal, verbal, linguistic, logical, mathematical, naturalistic, intrapersonal, visual, spatial, and musical. Now this has actually been debunked that people's brains only work in a certain way. However, I like to use it in the Giving It, Getting It, and Using It to make things interesting for my students. Students might be able to learn every way if they apply themselves, but that doesn't mean they will if they're not interested. So I like to keep things different. I like to shake things up, make it universal, so that no matter what, students are going to find a way to understand the content. And then, of course, this also works reworking the same material to create layers of understanding, to create that deep understanding, so the students can really understand the content, not just an individual context. Talking about Krashen's effective filter, first of all, acquisition versus learning. Krashen proposed that acquisition was superior to learning, acquisition being just sitting there and absorbing the language without having to do any active learning, and then learning is applying those strategies to pick up the language. Now, I think a combination of acquisition and learning is essential. This is definitely involving the giving it and the getting it aspects of my lessons, building on what the students know. Again, the language drops in the glass structure. And then, of course, I+1 is you want to build on the information, the I that the student already has, what they know, and then add to that. So again, building on that spiral, moving outwards, creating depth and breadth in their knowledge base. And then finally, Bloom's taxonomy. I remember when I was a student, many of the assessments and the learning was around understanding and remembering. I want to move it up to analyze, evaluate, and creating up there. So I want the students to be producing new work, justifying positions, making decisions, making connections. And this is, of course, involving the getting it, using it, and proving it. So I'm going to be creating tasks where students have to prove it by using creative cognitive complexity. And so, of course, this is also increasing the complexity of tasks, moving along that spiral, creating that breadth, creating that depth. And finally, what we've all been waiting for, how are your students going to be assessed and how are they going to be learning? So as you can already imagine, I'm not going to be doing the classic PPP, present, practice, prove structure of learning. I think that it is boring and students think it's boring, so I'm going to be doing task-based learning, and that's focusing on authentic language and on asking students to do meaningful tasks. My big thing with task-based learning is that the people who are learning should be the active ones in the class. So they're the ones that are going to be using the language resources rather than just practicing pre-selected item. It's going to be in a natural context developed from students' own experiences in the classroom. It's going to be personalized to them, and so it's going to feel more natural. Students will have a much more varied exposure to the language, so they're going to be using it in casual ways, informal ways, and academic ways, and the language explored will arise from students' needs and desires and interests, so they're actually going to be talking about things that they would talk about in real life. It's not just going to be like, I'm going to make a decision on what I'm going to teach and that's it. I'm going to do it based on what the students need to learn or what their language learning takes them. And it's super communicative this way. The kids are going to be using the language, and that's the most important thing, is to get them comfortable with using the language so that when they leave the classroom, they feel like they can use it outside of the classroom. And so, of course, the assessment should be modeled after learning. Formative assessment I've already touched on, and that's what I'm going to be watching with students to make sure that they're learning properly. What can I do to make them learn better? What can they do to focus on their strengths and weaknesses? And then summative is how I'm going to evaluate students, and I'm not going to be implementing many big exams. More, I'm going to be doing portfolio assessment. A portfolio assessment is a purposeful, systematic process of collecting and evaluating the student products. So all those products from the task-based learning, projects, posters, group work, individual work, presentations, reflections, creative writing, research, videos, recordings, and student improvement. I'm going to use that in these portfolio assessments to really give them a fair evaluation. And so there's 3 types: the showcase, documentation, and growth portfolio assessment, and I'm going to use a combination of that so that students can both show their best work, their work that they're most proud of, and show their areas of growth in other assessments. I hope to bring your kids some realism to the language of French and to the school. I know sometimes it can feel like there's school life and there's real life, but I really want to bridge that gap and help kids realize their potential not only in French but in other subjects as well. I hope that I can be a person in their lives that they can trust and that they can come to if they need help in other subjects, a space in my classroom for any kind of diverse needs, and I'm really glad that you guys are going to join me on this journey through the academic year. I'm sure your kids are going to learn something very applicable in my classroom, and I'm excited to do it with them. Thanks again.